Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren. Zuerst vielen herzlichen Dank für die Einladung und auch für die Möglichkeit, in dieser Konferenz teilzunehmen. I wish that our conference could have been lasting longer. And this could give me an opportunity to speak more fluent German than I'm trying to do it now. But I would also like to say thank you to my dear colleague Anders Levans for inviting me to this conference, and also send some greetings to Riga to my other dear colleague and friend Paul Zdayo, with whom we discussed the title, and not only the title but the subject of this presentation. So it has been an honor for me to participate in this conference all through the days. And so let me start with some geographical and historical background information about the subject proper that we will come to during this presentation. So first of all, let us take a look at this map we have seen already several times during this conference. I don't know why it's so very popular. Exactly the map of the Baltic provinces from the year 1904. But in this case, in this particular paper, it's also notable in the context that it's on the very border, on the very threshold before the outbreak of the revolution of 1905, which has had its consequences upon the relations between the Baltic German community and the Latvian community living in those days in the provinces of Livland and Kurland. So to give some more visual understanding of the political situation around this map and into this territory, we can of course see the coat of arms of the Russian Empire, and also symbolical visual descriptions of the two opposite forces being involved in mutual relations during the early 20th century in the Baltic provinces. So the Baltic German political tradition you see on the left, and the main institution which was also mentioned during the conference already, the main institution of the Latvian national movement, the Riga Latvian Society. We heard earlier today also about it in the presentation of Ivars Iebs. So this is the, so to say, constellation of powers in the Baltic provinces during the early 20th century. But to come to the early 20th century, we should perhaps take a short look on the preconditions of situation in the early 20th century, and on to turn our attention to some so to say, factual information about the processes that arose during the so-called long 19th century in the Baltic provinces. And of course, this is just an example to show the few most important things that happened on the soil of the Baltic provinces during the 19th century, and that actually shaped not only the preconditions for the Latvian national movement and its later discussions and competition in political sense with the Baltic German nobility, but also some of these notions, some of these facts we can see on the screen, also shaped the preconditions for the general situation in the Baltic provinces, apart from this competition between the Latvian national movement and the Baltic German political tradition already present here. As we can see also from the screen, there are several facts that have been mentioned already in this conference. So if there will be some more questions about it, we can come back to it. But now let us proceed to the main subject of this presentation today. And let me, ladies and gentlemen, introduce you to Robert Klaustiņš. A picture of him has been taken from the interwar period. It's 1920s, early 1930s, so not the proper period we are speaking about today in this presentation, but nevertheless. So it's, from one point of view, it's a quite typical biography for several Latvian intellectuals of the late 19th century and early 20th century. So he's born in a family of taskmaker at the Garoza manor near Jelgava or Mito. So representing a social layer in the Latvian society that is a little bit more so to say, ready for social and political emancipation than his other counterparts were of the same Latvian community. What does it mean to become an intellectual for those Latvian activists in the early 20th century? Most of them, just like Robert Klaustiņš was, most of them were school teachers in different parish schools, and also this means that their basic education was gained in teaching seminaries, and in this case it was already the period of the so-called Russification or unification policy, when Robert Klaustiņš finished the Baltic seminary and the Baltic seminary for teachers. I left the Russian denomination of this institution here on the screen, Pribaltijskaya Учительская семинария, and subsequently Klaustiņš, of course, became a practicing school teacher in several parishes in Livland. Although he himself was coming from Courland, but he mainly was acting in different parishes in Livland, as well as in schools also located in Riga. Afterwards, already at the very beginning of the 20th century, he spent a few years studying history and philology at the Moscow University in the years 1902-1903. What was so special about Robert Klaustiņš? Why we can talk about him as a special case? Nevertheless, I said it's quite a typical biography for his contemporaries. But what made Robert Klaustiņš so special case in the context of the relations that emerged between the Baltic German community and the Latvian community in the early 20th century. Along with other Latvian intellectuals of his time, Klaustiņš started his literary and also in part political activities in publishing some reviews in Latvian periodicals, starting from the last year of the 19th century, so since 1899. And he soon turned to historical novels. He's also known as one of the first authors of historical novels in Latvian literature in the early 20th century. And also he showed this particular interest in historical background of his country and the situation that was shaped due to the historical circumstances and the situation that he was also living in during his early career years of the 20th century. And this was the period of time, as also Ivars Iebs mentioned today earlier, that there was a discussion emerging within the Latvian national movement between the old nationalists of the Riga Latvian society who paid tribute to the Russian Empire and who were quite loyal and demonstrating their loyalty to the Russian Empire or the Russian crown, as it was said back then. And then there were the so-called young nationalists represented by Andrius Niedra, also mentioned today by Ivars Iebs. We will come to Andrius Niedra a little bit later in detail. Who were already aware of this policy of unification that was carried out by the Russian administration in the Baltic provinces, and who were aware already of the threats made for the for the development of national ethnic culture of the Latvian society. because of this unification policy. And then there were social democrats, Latvian social democrats, illegal political organization that was established in the 1904. And but even before that, as we saw a little bit earlier on this chronological table, this socialistic movement started to emerge already at the late, in the last years of the 19th century, but then it was successfully pulled down by the police in the last years of the 19th century. Nevertheless, the Social Democrats resurrected just before, on the very eve of the revolution 1905. Back to the question that was posed in the first paper today to your CEPs, what was the connection between the Social Democrats and the ochranka of the political police of the Russian Empire, or even to let's say Japanese special forces on the eve of the revolution of 1905. There are some researches made by Latvian historians some 10 and more than 10 years ago about this question, but the evidence is still quite limited. We could prepare and we could provide for answering this question. So back to the thesis, what made Robert Klaustiņš so particular interesting figure. Klaustiņš was among the first Latvian authors who started to critically analyze and reflect on the results of the Latvian national movement since the middle of the 19th century, since the so-called Young Latvian movement, and then as it gradually turned to this institutional form of the Riga Latvian society, and what happened to the Latvian national movement after the complex unification and Russification policy of the Russian Empire in the Baltic provinces started. And Klaustiņš is perhaps an interesting figure because he was neither supporting the old Latvian nationalists of the Riga Latvian society, nor he was intended to support the so-called new nationalist movement represented by Andrievs Niedra, and he was also quite critical towards Latvian social democrats, or as they were called back in the early 20th century, Latvian legal Marxists, because there was a possibility around the year 1905 to publish those brochures and particular articles that were, for instance, describing and explaining the historical situation of the Baltic provinces from the Marxist perspective also. So it's worthy to turn the attention towards Robert Klaustiņš just because he was neither supporting none of these general trends, so to say, in Latvian society or among Latvian national movement, and he was trying to see the whole picture as a complex thing, and he was also trying to reflect on it critically in his publications. Okay, and these activities were carried out by Klaustiņš just at the time when he was also in his studies of history and philology at the Moscow University. It is the same time, the years 1902 and 1903, when he was devoting several articles to the questions about the relationships that are emerging between the Baltic German and the Latvian communities. Another personality that was mentioned already during this conference, Rudolf Eucken, but long before he decided to come to Riga and visit the Herder Institute. Eucken's work, Grundbegriffe der Gegenwart, was quite popular among so to say, journalists and publicists also writing and publishing in Latvian. And this is also, if you take a look on the structure of Oiken's book, we can also get some notion about the way of academic thinking and academic reflection as it was common at the very end of the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century. So those the way of thinking that was based actually on the binary opposites identified everywhere in physics, in society, in politics, and also in culture. And this is also interesting from the point of view of the intellectual context in which Robert Klaustiņš was developing his attitudes towards current political issues and other things he was publishing about in his articles, that he tried to stay away somehow from this twofold or binary opposition based approach to processes, political and social processes taking place in society, and in particular in Latvian society at the beginning of the 20th century. Closer to the crisis that was mentioned in this in the title of this paper, it's of course the crisis of the revolution in the year 1905. And once again, a little chronological information about what shaped this crisis and what made it so acute and so important for the society of this period. We can see that actually maybe it's an ex-segregation, but the situation in the years 1905-1906 in a way led to a kind of civil war situation between the Baltic German and Latvian communities in the provinces of Livland, the Latvian part of the province of Livland, and also in the province of Kurland. And this is important to mention here, even if it's could be seen also as a kind of segregation, but it's quite close to the situation as it was understood by the contemporaries. If we can go through the publications of the early months of the year 1905 and 1906, when the censorship was going down for a while, and it was more. There were more possibilities to publish the way people were really approaching the situation they were living in. And this also is connected to the situation where Klaustiņš was in as a quite an active publicist of that time. And so just to remind the context of the age also in the visual terms. Of course, this could be called the threshold situation in the Baltic provinces. Below we can see a postcard, which is of course fake news in a way, because this postcard is compiled from several images and showing the imaginary situation in the central market of Riga, near the old town, on the bench of the river Daugava, and so the police is taking care of excluding some suspicious persons from their activities in the society in general. So this is how the so to say the commercial part of the society reacted to what was going on in the year 1905 by publishing these kind of compiled postcards, compiled narratives about the revolution or revolts in the province of Livland, and right above we can see another photograph that was distributed as a postcard, but this is not a fake news example anymore. This is a situation in a local parish school in one Livland vicinity. So the parish school that was destroyed by the so-called punishment or appeasement in brackets expeditions that came into the provinces of Livland and Kurland in the late 1905 and started to, so to say, appease the society and the revolts in the Baltic provinces. So the artillery acting against the parish schools somewhere in Livland, which was also a case of demonstration of the imperial power in a way. And of course, another part of the story, which is also quite well known, and also thanks to publications like this, like Livlands Zerstörte Schlösser that appeared already in the early 1906, showing exactly all the consequences of the revolution of the 1905, including the burned down manor houses, this one in Alaži in Riga Kreis or Riga district of that time, and next to the burned down manor house is the burned down peasants' house or residence nearby in the same administrative territory, and above there's a picture of social democrat activists taking over the local power somewhere also in the province of Livland. So even if we go in a way like this through the publications of the years 1905, 1906, we can get the notion of the situation as it was back then in this period of time, and what were the outcomes, what were the results of these revolts, leading, as I said, to a kind of civil war between two communities living on the territory of provinces of Livland and Kurland in this period of time. So this is just to remind that the tensions between Baltic German and Latvian community were very high at that period of time, and this is important because when we come back to the issues of Robert Klaustiņš, that it was quite complicated for him not to take sides in this period of time, and trying to stay as neutral as possible. Another example where this neutrality actually failed is the example of Andrius Niedra, already mentioned today by Ievs, and Andrius Niedra, who came out with his publication of very long publication of an article or political essay titled Morituri. Maybe he has been reading Julius Eckhardt, as it was also said by Professor Bruggemann, I guess, a few days before, when he mentioned this Die sterbende Stunde des Baltischen Deutschtums. This is the same that was mentioned by Julius Eckhardt back in the 1876. Niedra somehow took over this path of thinking, this way of thinking, and he published before the outbreak of the revolution in 1905, a few years before, he published his political essay Morituri, explaining to his Latvian contemporaries that please do calm down, don't worry about the influence of the Baltic German nobility anymore, it's a passing by structure. Don't pay so much attention and so much political fusions to this competition between Baltic German nobility and the Latvian national movement. And also Niedra was quite popular around the year 1905. He lost his popularity very rapidly during the revolution of 1905 because he was acting in his publications against the main trend of social democrats, and he was criticizing the Latvian social democrats as mainly taking care for their political agenda only and not thinking about the real consequences of the revolts or the revolution of 1905, what this revolution will bring to society and also to the Latvian nation as such. Klaustiņš avoided the destiny of Andrius Niedra. He was not so very sharp as I said, in taking sides towards one or the other political or social position. But nevertheless, Klaustiņš also, as a kind of response to this political essay of Niedra Morituri, in the next year appeared another political essay by Robert Klaustiņš in the year 1903, which the title of this essay could be translated as "What is that divides us?" Kas mūs skalda in Latvian. Yeah? What is that divides us? And in this essay, Klaustiņš was approaching the problem about relations between the Estonians, the Latvians, and the Baltic Germans. This is a quite a rare text to be found in this period of time. And even if we consider the factor of the censorship in the year 1903, when this essay was published, it's very interesting to read and to see the conclusions that Klaustiņš was making. Another essay that is worth to be mentioned here was published already several years after the end of the revolution of 1905. This was the year 1909, and the essay by Klaustiņš with the title "Notes on Nationalism and Cosmopolitanism." And Klaustiņš turned to some historical examples in his essay, and he was starting his essay with comparing the nationalism in ancient Greece and the nationalism of Jewish community during its history. And the conclusion Klaustiņš was making was that, of course, this comparison was made not for its own sake, but this comparison was made for, so to say, educational reasons, for educational grounds, to show the Latvian national movement an example what is the difference between the so to say historical Jewish nationalism and historical nationalism in ancient Greece. So, coming closer to the end and coming to the conclusions, there are some conclusions that we ourselves can make if we consider this discussion that was going inside the Latvian national movement and among several Latvian intellectuals of the early 20th century, what is to do about our position in the Baltic provinces, what is to do with our relationships to the Baltic German community. I would like to say here that there was no strict and only one-way answer to these questions, and these questions were considered to be quite important, quite significant for the contemporaries dealing with them and making their publications about this situation in the Baltic provinces. But we cannot make just one conclusion that there was one leading trend in, let's say, in accordance what to do with the relations with the Baltic German community. So the question remained open even after the revolution of 1905, even after all the revolts and all the military clashes between representatives of the Latvian Social Democrats and the Baltic Germans who are trying to protect themselves from the revolutionary violence. And this mutual violence experience, of course, had some ricochets, some backshot in the year of 1990 during the Latvian independence war, when the situation somehow repeated itself. What was an urgent issue in the year 1905 turned out to be an urgent issue also some 14 years later, in the year 1990. But nevertheless, it's also not only about the military clashes and the mutual violence between two communities living side by side and having a common history for several centuries, but it's also an example, and in this context, Robert Klaustiņš is interesting even today, an example that there was a kind of efforts to make a clear and neutral approach to the situation what was going on around them, around these intellectuals of the early 20th century, and in the situation that they were actually themselves living through. It was not a cold academic reflection from the historical distance, but we have to keep in mind that all those discussions going around the year 1905, including discussions about relations between the Baltic German and the Latvian communities, were urgent for the people who were involved in these processes surrounding them for several years. Thank you very much.